Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the last and final presentation of the Healthcare and Life Sciences track on day 2 of TC17. Hope you're having fun and a lot of learning happening here. My name is Andy Day. I'm the Senior Director for Healthcare and Life Sciences at Tableau. I'm one of the leaders who helped establish the Healthcare and Life Sciences business at Tableau, and I'm responsible for the growth of the business globally. So it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our speakers for this session who come from Stryker Endoscopy. So we have Victoria Lee, who is a Senior Purchasing Analyst, and Eric Enblad, who's a Senior Manager of Demand Planning and Data Analytics. And they'll talk about the strategic business process, which I've known in my previous life, where I began with the supply chain business, which is called sales and operations planning, and is key to driving success across the enterprise, across many companies. So to hear more about this, welcome Eric and Victoria to take you through the presentation. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, thank you guys. Can you hear me all right? Is this on? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. We're extremely excited to just share a little bit about how we've used Tableau within Stryker and talk through some of the challenges we faced along the way. So I'll jump into it here. First, I just wanted to share a little bit about myself. My name is Eric Enblad. I'm the Senior Manager of Demand Planning and Data Analytics at Stryker Endoscopy. This is just kind of a snapshot of me and, go back, who I am. My family kind of shown up there on the left picture. We went to the PGA Championship this year. Big fan of golf. I love getting outside. Hiking, snowboarding, anything outside is great for me. If you see me at a wedding, there's a chance you're going to see me on the dance floor. I'm not a great dancer, but I can't stay off the dance floor when I'm at weddings. I went to the University of Michigan as well as my brother and sister, and she actually played basketball there. Go Blue. Great. Oof. All right, door's over there. And then there's a couple pictures of me with my dog, Lucy, my daughter, who's 1.5. I went back again. I got to get this thing under control. My daughter, Chloe, is 1.5. And just a couple other fun things. My favorite TV show is Battlestar Galactica. Any Battlestar Galactica fans? Yes. So say we all. Sorry if you don't know that reference. And just why I love data analytics personally. Sometimes you're surprised by what you find. And we all have these internal biases. We have these things that we believe to be true. And through data analytics, sometimes you're surprised and you actually change your mind. So with that, I'll let Victoria share a little bit about herself.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Lee. I'm now a Senior Demand Planning Analyst on Eric's team. So I live with my boyfriend. We all live in South San Jose. I played volleyball at UC Davis. So that's a picture of some of my teammates. And I have a dog. Her name is Elia. At the top there, that's her best friend, Sven. They're the same size. He's a moose stuffed animal. And then that's me packing for Tableau, and she's that little thing huddled in my suitcase as a little stowaway. She didn't make it, but she sends her regards. A few things about me. So I play volleyball, like to do some yoga, play ukulele, and bake, like going to Disneyland. Favorite TV shows, Parks and Rec. Does anyone watch Parks and Rec? I highly resonate with Leslie Knope. Anyone else? Leslie Knope? Yes. I feel like I am Leslie. Yes, welcome. I love data analytics, especially Tableau, because I love helping people. I think that some people are so used to the day-to-day and think that things continue to run this way, and this is the way it's always been. But I view it as it doesn't have to be this way. Let me help you improve your process. And that's why I love Tableau.
Awesome. All right, so here's our agenda today. We're going to start by just telling you a little bit about Stryker, who we are as a company, jump into the sales and operations planning process. And the way we're going to actually refer to that process is integrated business planning. Basically the same thing, it's just kind of what we call it at Stryker, or IBP for short. And so we'll talk through some of the challenges we had with implementing that process, as well as how Tableau was a huge enabler for us in developing IBP. And then Victoria's going to walk you through some of the awesome use cases that we have to share with Tableau. So just a quick overview of Stryker. Our mission is, together with our customers, we are driven to make healthcare better. This is a mission that kind of permeates throughout the organization. It's something that we're all very passionate about. And these are our core values that we also very much relate to and permeates across our organization. Our founder, Dr. Homer Stryker, was both an orthopedic surgeon and an inventor. And he started by inventing the first cast cutter and the wedge turning frame, which was used in hospitals to prevent bed sores for patients that were in the hospital. And his innovation, that culture has certainly lasted for the last 75 years and is a big part of our DNA. And just some numbers for you. I know you want to see the numbers at a glance. We're number 252 on Fortune 500 list. We're approaching $12 billion in sales globally. We employ over 33,000 people worldwide. And we've experienced 37 straight years of sales growth. And we're very proud of being a growth company. And so we're pretty proud of that metric. And this is just a quick snapshot of our portfolio. We're very diversified across our products, and we're in quite a few different spaces within medical technology. The three key areas are orthopedics, medical and surgical equipment, and neurotechnology and spine. For Victoria and I, we're kind of primarily in this space. The minimally invasive surgery, that's what Stryker Endoscopy is focused on, so your visualization equipment for doctors in the OR, and as well as some of the infrastructure integration and data capture stuff in the operating room. All right, so jumping into sales and operations planning. So if you're familiar with S&OP, where are we going here? Sorry, guys. If you're familiar with S&OP, you've probably seen something like this cycle up here. So for us, it starts with product lifecycle management, or PLCM, and that's really having a plan for your entire portfolio from the beginning of its life cycle to the end of its life cycle. So planning for new product launches, as well as the phase out of older products. That process then kind of feeds into the demand planning process, which is we're then focused on forecasting the next 12 to 24 months and trying to have kind of a strategic planning horizon for forecasting. At the end of that process, we hold a meeting called the Executive Demand Review. I gotta stop using this. Not sure, but I'm going to let that sit there. Just use the keys. So the Executive Demand Review is where we come together with the commercial leaders of the business and talk about the biggest risks with demand. We're talking about the biggest opportunities and the trends and trying to better understand our customer needs. From there, it feeds into the supply planning process where the supply chain team is looking at their constraints, their capacity, their inventory, what we're getting from our suppliers to see. So I think it is on a. That's a good point. Huh. I'm going to take this out. And my apologies. So the supply planning process is then where they're looking, can supply meet the demand plan? And from there, we get together in what's called the IBP meeting, or where we reconcile the differences. And so if we have any major risks where we could be looking at backorder, something like that, that would feed into our IBP meeting. And then the biggest issues, the ones that we can't resolve, will go to the executive level IBP meeting in front of our president and his leadership team. So when we started this process, we had quite a few challenges. And for us at Stryker, it's a pretty relatively new process that we started only about 4 or 5 years ago. And so from the beginning, we were really very focused on the short term. We were firefighting day to day, chasing backorder. Our planning horizon was really a couple of days, maybe a week at most, and we really weren't looking at the next 12 to 24 months. And so from a tactical standpoint, we're using Excel. That was our primary tool. This is a snapshot of one of those planning tools that we were using. And this was run off of an Excel macro. And so we're actually pretty good in Excel. And we had, we're trying to do color coding. We're trying to make it visual, but it's still a very manual process for us. And then we really weren't leveraging the capabilities of our ERP system. We have tons of data in Oracle, and we just weren't capturing that. We weren't bringing that into the process. And so root cause, it was just a very manual, cumbersome process for us. Again, we're entering stuff into Excel. We were then putting together dashboards in Excel as well. But this was a time-consuming process. Probably 90% of our time was spent on the data entry and getting the data ready. We were spending probably less than 10% of our time on actual analysis and strategic planning. Of course, this was because we had data in different sources. When we needed custom things, we had to go to IT to get custom reports, which most of the time meant we were not getting custom reports. And we had pretty much maximized our capabilities within Excel and SharePoint. And this is actually, this is exactly what our process looked like. Every month we would come in, and for all of our product families, we would enter in our supply, our demand, our capacity, our inventory information, and then we actually had a pretty cool dashboard, an Excel pivot chart that connected to that, but we didn't spend a lot of time on this side. It was mostly on the left. So this was our landscape before deployment. Again, we had Oracle. We were running static reports into Excel from Oracle. And then the sloth, you can see that was our manual data entry process. And then, of course, we were putting visuals together in Excel as well. Following our Tableau deployment, this is our current landscape. So we've got Oracle. It's feeding our data warehouse. And we are now connecting Tableau server directly to the data warehouse. And we're running automated extracts from that system. And it's been a huge enabler for us, and we've reduced tons of time just by setting up this infrastructure. So integrated business planning with Tableau, our strategy was to connect directly to the data. And we wanted to build efficiencies through that process and just eliminate all of the manual stuff we were doing every month. And we're talking about probably a full day or more where we were prepping data and manually entering it into Excel. And then also we wanted to make it visual for the meetings. We wanted stuff to pop out at people so that they could see the problems before they happened. And we wanted to use that to make better planning decisions for the business. Our goal is to make information available to our cross-functional teams, engage executive leadership, and that might be probably the most important goal that we had when we began this process. It was kind of a grassroots effort, and it wasn't necessarily led from the executive level. In order to have a strong IBP or S&OP process, you have to have executive engagement. And ultimately, this is all to improve control for the business and stop reacting to the day-to-day. And I guess in addition, provide deeper customer insights, understand what our customers actually want and need from us, and ultimately lengthen that planning horizon to 12 to 24 months. So I included this quote. This was from our VP of Finance, and it was actually a huge milestone for us. After we got out of one of the executive IBP meetings, this is after we had Tableau, and he said, "This is my new favorite meeting of the month, every month." And that was like, we made it. We actually got people excited about this meeting. And now he's calling us the unbiased seekers of the truth. So for our VP of Finance, he loves it because he's getting kind of like the real picture every month now. These were, when we started this, these were our key business objectives. We wanted to decrease backorder by 25%. We wanted to drive forecast error down under 20%, and at the time we were probably at closer to 40% error in our forecast accuracy. And then obviously help deliver on our days in inventory targets and our sales budgets as well. This was one of the first Tableau dashboards that we actually published to the organization. And what we're trying to do here is just make it visible for everybody to see how are we doing toward that goal of decreasing backorder by 25%. So you can see on the left, that was 2014. See some pretty big spikes in backorder. And our average daily backorder is represented by that gray line at the top. And then our goal was that red dotted line in the middle. And in 2015, we're tracking to what our actual average daily backorder was pacing toward. So it was just it was an awesome thing. It wasn't necessarily specific to the IBP process, but it was bringing visibility to our goal. And people were excited about seeing this every month. So just a couple of key lessons that we learned along the way. You definitely have to have a strategy around your data sources. For us, we kind of got a little bit messy when we started implementing Tableau Server and the data extracts. This screenshot here shows 4 different kind of almost duplicate data sources that said margins. So we're connecting to the same margins table. You're not necessarily going to get to one data source or one source of truth, but for us, we definitely didn't need 4 duplicate data sources. Develop a rollout and training plan for end users. When we went live with Tableau Server, we were starting to publish everything to the organization. We didn't quite see the ramp up that we expected to see with the usage and people using our dashboards. So having a little bit better training plan would have helped that process. Certainly partner with IT. They can accelerate things for you, and they certainly accelerated things for us. And also have a strategy around your server roles and responsibilities. You got to know who is the person who's going to make sure we're giving access to the right people, making sure we don't end up with 4 duplicate data sources, that kind of thing. And probably the 2 most important things that we learned were embrace your mistakes along the way. That really helps drive a culture of innovation. So people aren't necessarily scared of making a mistake. Embrace those and know that you're going to make mistakes along the way. And don't wait for the organization. For us, I said, like I mentioned before, it was a grassroots effort, and we just pushed forward with this. And ultimately, as we started rolling things out, we got more engagement, and our meetings, the executive demand review, the IBP meetings, we started getting much better engagement from the rest of the business. So with that, I'm going to let Victoria walk you guys through some of the use cases.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, so I'm here to walk you guys through some of the use cases. I'll start with explaining a high-level summary of each of the IBP portions of that meeting, and then I'll give you an example of a use case. I won't go deep into the details of each of the dashboards, but if you have any questions, please see us afterwards. We'd be happy to help. Okay, so product lifecycle management. The goal of product lifecycle management is to get all key stakeholders, so people in charge of FDA approval, manufacturing, purchasing, marketing, sales, forecasting, finance, and leadership, all aligned and synchronized to a product's lifespan. And when I say lifespan, it's the product launch, how long we plan to sell it, and then when we plan to stop selling it. So we created a product lifecycle management roadmap. What you're looking at here is each line represents a product's lifespan. So you'll look at those icons. Let's point. Oh, okay. You look at these icons here. Those represent the critical dates in the product's lifespan. So in the green, that's when we're going to keep selling it, right? That means if you're in manufacturing, that's when you need to continue buying it. If we were able to scroll over, this is just a snapshot, but if we were looking at the dashboard, we would scroll over and see the full lifespan of that product. So we'd see the transition from green to red when we would understand that this is when I need to stop buying, or this is when I need to stop forecasting. But if you look down a few lines, you'll see that there is a product that we've been supporting for a while that we do plan on phasing out. Okay. So for the executive demand review, this is a meeting that our team holds with our sales, marketing, finance, and forecasting teams. The goal of this meeting is to gain alignment and understand if we are hitting our financial projections, and then any risks or upside to those projections. A lot of times in this meeting, we will go over how our product launches are doing. So when we think back to that product lifecycle management dashboard, right, you have an initial assumption of we're going to launch this and we think it will make this much money. So in this new product launch tracking, we're able to look at the actuals and compare against what we had initially forecasted for that product launch. It gives us quick assumptions and feedback on how we're doing versus our initial plan. So we know, okay, this analysis was done well, or this analysis was poor and we need to do it again. And every single product launch, it'll just make us better and better, so it helps our forecasting. And then for every single one of these projects, we'll create a more granular dashboard to track an initial product launch. So if you look at this project, it would tie down, and this is a more granular look at that. So when you launch a product, we're trying to figure out at what price is it being sold, and we're tracking things like that. Or we're trying to understand if multiple SKUs are being launched on the platform, what's the product mix? What does the product mix look like? Or we will combine our sales and forecasting and blend those two data sets and try to track our volumes and sales. So you'll see here, this darker portion are actuals, and then this lighter portion is a forecast. So as a part of the forecasting team, I can go in and see, well, if it's not very dark and we're not really attaining to our forecast, I need to re-review, right? I need to figure out something's wrong with the forecast. And this is actually a use case. So we went in here and we said, this month, one of these products didn't really attain to the forecast. We need to make a change. So we did another analysis and actually needed to drop a forecast by a couple $1 million. So we'll go into the executive demand review and do a deeper dive analysis. And we'll bring these analyses to the executive demand review. So what you're looking at here are two different generations. So one blue line and one orange line. These are two products that are dependent on one another. This one is the older model, and this one is the newer model. So we decided that maybe this initial launch plan was a little bit high. Let's run the numbers again and make it a little bit lower, and then also continue to track those actuals. So we'll bring an analysis like this into the executive demand review to really give more insight and reasoning as to why we're dropping the forecast or why we need to do this type of change. We'll also get questions in the executive demand review like, we know that this generation of the camera is selling really great, but how is it doing in comparison to previous generations? How does that trend look? So we're able to do an analysis on that and pull that into the executive demand review to be discussed as well. And still in the executive demand review, we work a lot with marketing. So Stryker has really, really great technology and continues to improve the technology because we want to improve our patient outcome. And we want to work with our customers to upgrade them to that newest technology. So we'll work with our marketing teams to understand who's on the old technology and how do we work with those customers to get them on the newest technology. And then we're also able to look at products being sold together to maximize the technology use. And all of the dashboards that I've shown you, under executive demand review, we actually pull into storyboards. So for the executive demand review meeting, we have been using storyboards. So throughout the month, an analyst will look at a product launch, or they'll look at an analysis, or they'll look at a tracker. And when the executive demand review comes up, they'll just pull all of their analysis into a storyboard. And this is a lot more dynamic than a PowerPoint. PowerPoint is very static, right? But if we send out a storyboard ahead of time, people can ask better questions during the meeting. They can interact with the data, right? They can use their tooltips. They can drill up and down hierarchies. And we also, within the meeting, can answer better questions, so we continue in the meeting flow. So after executive demand review goes to supply review. So in executive demand review, we'll all agree upon the newest forecast. That forecast will flow down into supply review. Supply review will consist of manufacturing and sourcing and purchasing and their management teams, and they're discussing projected inventory levels, capacity planning, any material constraints, and highlighting those for the business and creating a plan around that. So inventory control. Inventory control gets really tricky, right? Because you want to hold enough to satisfy your customer, but not so much because you want to remain liquid and you want to be ready for any quality changes. So it's pretty tricky, and it's even trickier if you can't see what your inventory is going to look like, right? So what we've done is create a dashboard that allows us to project our inventory. Right now it's colored by different business units. And we're able to project our inventory, and so our purchasing analysts and people in charge of build plans for manufacturing can make more educated decisions about their build plans or about when they purchase. And if it looks like your inventory will go too high, you would bring that up in the supply review. And in general, this gives us more control over our inventory. Okay, so moving on to material and product shortage projection. So we are also able to project any type of material shortages, whether it be component or even on the finished good level. We're able to look at that because previous to this dashboard, I was in purchasing, and it feels like every day, if you don't have a component, you're just gonna solve that problem. You're instantly firefighting, but you don't have any vision for the long term. So you bring that component, and maybe you're saving $1,000 worth of backorder, but you don't realize that in a week's time, you'll run out of a different component, and it's going to cost your company $5 million, but you can't see it. So what we did is we visualized on an item level basis any product shortages. And so what you'll see, and I'll be demoing this dashboard later, but what you'll see is a listing based on these dates, a listing of all products by either quantity or dollars that are projecting a shortage. And then we threw that on a scatter plot to be able to really see the differences between those backorder shortages and help you realize and prioritize this one should be tackled first. And then this is a diagram on a SKU level basis. It's just showing any increases or decreases to your inventory, and this yellow line is just a trend line. So you can see where your inventory is projected to be at. What this has allowed us to do is really prioritize what our buyers are doing and the problems that they're solving. And so if you're able to see out, you can fix the problem before it happens. And if you're unable to solve it, then you would bring that issue to supply review and make it known to the business. So we can create a contingency plan and continue to support our customers. Okay, after supply review, we go into a reconciliation review. So what that is it's a coming together of our demand and supply teams, and they come together and agree upon a plan moving forward. Okay. One of the first questions that kind of come up in these reconciliation reviews is supply will say something like, we've changed this build plan like 10 times and it's really frustrating. Is the forecast even accurate? So as a forecasting team, we decided to create this dashboard. And we have a more aggregated view of our forecast attainment. And so we were able to blend our order numbers together and our forecasting together and look at how accurate our forecasts have been. And then it feeds down into a SKU level basis so we can see what's driving that attainment. And attainment is helpful, but we also want to know, well, over-attaining, will that really impact the customer? So we also blended in current inventory levels to understand and kind of prioritize if we are over-attaining by a lot and we have low inventory, we should definitely be looking at this forecast first. We definitely need to create a contingency plan around this product right now. And then just down here, we just have a visualization on a SKU level basis, how supply versus demand has been, or how actuals versus forecast has been throughout the entire year on a month-to-month basis. And so that really helps when we come to the table with, for the reconciliation review, we're able to answer these questions and say, yes, maybe we spiked this 1 month, but for the past 2 months we've under-attained. So no, we won't be making any forecast changes, and here's why. Here's what that looks like. So we're able to better come together with our supply teams. And so when we answer those questions, the next question says, well, okay, you had a spike this month, why did that happen? And so people wonder, well, this didn't attain to the forecast. Do we have fewer customers? On average, are our customers buying more? Are they buying less? What's the percent mix between new customer and old customer? So we created this dashboard to be able to answer those questions, right? You don't want to be the bottleneck as the analyst. to continually pull this data over and over again and look it up for everyone. You want to empower your users, and you want them to be able to answer questions on their own, right? These base level questions, so you advance your company and you advance the questions that they're asking. So they can answer their own questions. They can look up, let's see, the number of customers % change versus last year. They can look up the quantity % change. They can look up, in general, just the quantity or the dollars spent or the dollars on average spent by a new customer. So they can look and utilize all the different filters by year and rolling up and down hierarchies and looking at different granularities to really answer their own questions. So when we bring this to the table, right, that helps our purchasing teams go back to their suppliers and answer those questions and keep that relationship built, because sometimes our suppliers will be frustrated and say, well, why is this spiked? Our purchasing team won't know. And so if they can just answer and say, oh, well, we just had, you know, one very large customer order skewed the data. On average, it's still very normal. So it helps to maintain that relationship. Or if we look at, for the last couple months, we've had a huge surge of new customers. Maybe our marketing teams will look at that, and they will be able to create a strategy around retainment of those new customers. So after the reconciliation review, we move on to the executive review. So content within the executive review is anything that hasn't been resolved in the reconciliation review and that needs decision-making by our executive level. So people that attend that meeting are directors and senior managers and leadership, and we mainly go over financials and the health of the business, and then risks or upside to the business. So with the financials, this is just a quick financial snapshot. So we are able to see what we initially projected for and budgeted at the beginning of the year versus what we're actually doing, and then also versus our prior year. So we're quickly able to answer all of these questions, because previous to this, they were all housed in very different sources of data, so we can just bring them together and answer the question like that. Okay. And now I will hand it back off to Eric to go over our key benefits, value, and future direction.
Thanks, Beck. Okay, so as I mentioned before, probably our biggest goal is to get leadership involved and engaged in the process. And I mentioned today, they're more engaged and involved than they've ever been before. And so our executive IBP meeting, our executive demand review, we have now an executive supply review as well. Those are all meetings where we have great attendance and leadership engagement. We have created increased control for the business, so we shot for that 25% reduction in backorder. We've well exceeded that as an organization. I think we decreased it by 60% in that first year, actually, and we continue to actually create more control as we get better at this process. And ultimately improve data-driven decisions. We're bringing a lot of stuff to the table now, and the organization is investing in data analytics more than we've ever done before. So that's been really exciting for our team. And our forecast error, while we shot for 20%, and at the time we were at probably 40% error, we're now operating at under 15% error for our forecasting. So that's been a huge benefit for the supply team as well, so that for our suppliers, as Victoria mentioned, we're not kind of yanking them around and sending them different signals all the time. And just kind of next steps, this is where we feel like we're at. You know, we really started at that early stage, and we've been working up. We're kind of at that operational level right now, and ultimately we want to get to world class and be Jedi Masters and Master Yoda at IBP. But it's been really fun so far, and it's been an exciting journey to get to this point. And Tableau has certainly been a huge enabler for us along the process. And lastly, I think Vic's going to do a quick live demo of one of the dashboards. gonna turn it on.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Good? Okay. So we'll be going over this use case dashboard. So again, this is to project any material shortages or finished goods shortages. So this is currently, thank you. So this is currently looking at backorder projection from 6/27 out through 10/1/2018. And if I were a unit manager, I would just go into my business unit. Let's say I'm the business unit manager of video. So I'd filter for video, and it would filter and show me everything that I'm projected to be short for between these dates, and it lists them out for me, and then I'm also able to see them on my scatter plot. Let's see. So I'm also able to see them on my scatter plot, right? And I can like hover over them, see them correlate on the list. And so if I want to dig into, this part looks pretty serious, what's going on here, I'll click this part number, and it will populate its projected inventory graph. So what you're looking at here is this is how much we're going to start with. And then these red bars are basically consuming that inventory, and then these blue and green bars will increase the inventory. And this dotted one here would be safety stock. So I'd be looking at this and say, this looks not so good. Down here, our inventory is below 0, not good, not good. So maybe I would ask my buyer, what's going on here? And maybe I'm looking at it on the month level, right? So this is how many we expect in July, this is what we expect in August, but maybe I want to get a little bit more granular. So I'd go over to the state level, and I'd pick maybe a more granular date. So I'd go down to week, and now I see, okay, so this is what's happening on a week level basis. But I don't like all these colors, they're really confusing to me. I just want to know when is it good and when is it bad. So I'd change my view, and instead I'd go over to grayscale, and I can just see, okay, red is bad, green is good, and just keep continuing the discussion with my team. And then if we were unable to solve this issue, it would be escalated to supply review. So that would be the case for a manager. But if you're a buyer, you would filter for your own name, or if you're about to get on a supplier call, you would filter for that specific supplier, and it would just list out any potential issues that you have, and that would be all of your discussion points for your call. And you can change all of the views, and we really try to make it custom because you have so many different people looking at it, and everyone likes to look at things differently. So it's just helping them to feel more comfortable with the dashboard. And if you want people to really, really use it, you have to make them love it, right? So you almost want to customize it for whatever needs that they may have.
So just to comment on this one, has been really powerful for our unit managers. Before, they felt like they didn't have visibility to the stuff that we were going to potentially be on backorder in the future. And it was, again, we were reacting to backorder every day. So it was moving from firefighting and giving our managers more power, I guess, to look out into the future and see what are the future risks and can we get ahead of those, and that helped get us out of that constant churn of tackling backorder today and tomorrow and the next day, and just move away from the firefighting.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Huge round of applause for Victoria and Eric. So we have time for a few questions. I'll actually ask the first one. Going from that 40% demand planning error to reducing it to 15%, did you quantify the impact of that? That's probably like millions of dollars, right there?
Yeah, it was definitely, we quantify it by probably $10 million more in backorder reduction or prevention.
As a consequence of that? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Questions from the audience? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
I was just curious, your timeline and resources that went into this, looks like you did for your sales organization. Did the rest of your organization find that they wanted Tableau used for dashboards in their divisions as well? So to get to your intermediate level where you're a couple years away from getting fully mature, what kind of resources did they come?
So I think we actually probably started more on the operational side. And then we realized we had to be more focused on the sales organization and more focused on the commercial business. And when we started to shift to focus more on understanding our customer needs, that really was kind of an accelerator for us. We started using Tableau probably about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. I think we were in version 9 at the time. We didn't have Tableau server, but we were leveraging it to publish PDFs and things like that. Once we started getting it out to the organization, some of these dashboards, people wanted more immediately, and probably to the point where we've gotten so many requests where we're now trying to manage that and figure out solutions to make sure that we're getting everybody the stuff that they need more efficiently than we were by just responding to all the requests. And I wouldn't say that we're necessarily mature yet. I think we're at the point where we've come a long way, but I think we still got a long ways to go. Right now, I want to say we have probably 8 people that are really like the developers. Yeah.
Next question.
You mentioned that partnering with IT is important. How on board were they with using Tableau versus we have OBIE, right? And OBIE has its own dashboarding kind of capabilities. So what was that conversation like?
I'd say it's probably still ongoing for us a little bit. I wouldn't say that they were super comfortable with putting all the data in our hands and then allowing us to create our own dashboards and publish these things. I think in their mind, it's a little bit of the Wild West. But it's from the leaders on the business side, how much they've really engaged with the things that we're publishing and how much they can see the value in the organization. That has probably been the best thing for us in terms of that conversation with IT. So now we're working together. And when it comes to creating custom SQL queries or really connecting to the right data on the back end, they've been really helpful for us from that side of things.
Any other questions from the audience?
For the data warehouse, what's the scope of that? And was that created by IT before you guys started with Tableau, or was part of your push forward including creating that? And your forecasting you mentioned, is that data within that warehouse, or do you analyze the forecast somewhere else and then add that data in? If that makes sense.
Yeah, good question. So the data warehouse was something that was already created before we had Tableau. And when we were doing everything in Excel for this IBP process, I would say we didn't even know what we had in that data warehouse. It was it had all the data we needed, really, from a sales perspective and an orders perspective. We still have our forecasts kind of housed in a different location, to answer your question. And we're leveraging Tableau to kind of pull those things together and connect to those different data sources. But we didn't know at the time when we first went and got Tableau desktop and we started creating dashboards, we didn't know that we had this awesome data warehouse with all of this stuff already in it. And so once we figured that out, we figured out that we could connect directly to that data source. Once we were able to do the automatic extracts with server, changed the game for us. But that was already created. And so that was a great thing to discover.
Does mobility play into your rollout of Tableau in terms of Tableau mobile and on iPads and iPhones?
Want to answer that one? Okay. Yeah, so we are using mobile a little bit. A couple of the dashboards that we've created are around like shipment tracking to projection, and one of those is specifically made for mobile, so that our leaders across the business can get an update every single day on where our shipments are at toward projection for the month. We're just kind of scratching the surface there, though, and we want to start getting into more mobile applications with it.
Question there? Okay.
You said you started off on Excel and then made the transition over. have you made a 100% transition, and what were the pain points coming from Excel-based over to Tableau with adoption with all of the different groups?
I would say we haven't made 100% adoption yet. On the demand planning side of things, we are 100% in Tableau, and our executive demand review, as Victoria mentioned, that's done through Tableau storyboards. And that was a big kind of milestone for us when we said, okay, we're no longer using PowerPoint. We're just going to do the whole meeting in Tableau storyboards. And it was kind of a goal of ours so that we could just cut the cord and say, we're going to do everything in Tableau. There's still a transition, probably more on the supply team, to get fully into Tableau. Some of our global data sources have been a challenge, so we're trying to get more folks on it. So we're not 100% of the way there, but I would say as we've made that transition, it's been an engagement driver for the team. When we start getting rid of the manual processes that they were doing with data entry and VLOOKUPs and that kind of thing, it's like, wow, I didn't know that I could do this before. And so now the team's super excited about it.
Question back there. Okay.
So I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more. You'd said that you sort of build out these stories and reports for the executive management, I gather. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about to what degree they're viewing it as sort of a static report, and to what degree they're actually sort of using analysis tools to drill down on their own.
Mostly using it as a static report right now. Our teams, our managers in marketing, our managers in operations, they're starting to use some of the tools to drill down and the filters and that kind of thing. We're not to the point yet where our executive leaders are actually going to the dashboards and navigating through it themselves, but that's to come. Yeah.
So I had a question. Having worked with life sciences companies for a long time, life sciences companies, especially pharma, but even medical device companies, are fairly notorious, right, for having huge days of inventory, low inventory turns, which is of course justified, right, because the cost of goods sold is low and lives are at stake. So did you see a quantitative impact in terms of inventory carrying cost, days of inventory, inventory turnover, based on being able to render this real-time visibility to the S&OP process?
It's a good question. It's something that we kind of started tracking, back at day one, and we're still tracking our inventory. I wouldn't say that we've seen a huge step change in terms of our inventory dropping, but it was increasing consistently, and that is now under control. And so I think it's that feeling of control and knowing what inventory levels we're going to have 3 to 6 months from now is what's really been powerful for our teams.
Any other questions from the audience? Okay, you have one more?
So lessons learned, right? So if you had to do this all over again, for people that are maybe newer here, what would you have done? What would you have kept the same, and what would you have done differently?
I think I certainly would have gotten IT involved earlier. Like I said, we kind of stumbled on the fact that we had a data warehouse. It's like, of course we had a data warehouse. That was already set up. And when we found that out and we could connect directly to it, it was a game changer, and that probably should have happened earlier. So if we would have gotten involved or gotten IT involved in what we were trying to do earlier, I think that would have accelerated things. And then outside of that, I think probably the training side of things too. When we started publishing all these dashboards to the organization, they all thought it was really cool, and this is awesome stuff, but we didn't quite see the ramp up of usage that we expected. Now we're seeing kind of step changes in that. The organization's like starting to really leverage these dashboards on a daily basis, but probably a better training plan early on too.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, I'd like to thank Victoria and Eric for an awesome presentation.
Thanks.